So it's an honor to be amongst all of you. Thank you so much for coming here tonight and making it a very special evening. If you heard the steps of a woman, a ghost in heels out back, that was me pacing like a chihuahua. I need to get one thing out of the way very quickly. I actually was a ballet dancer about 500 pizzas ago. And yeah, and we just need to kind of, I'll just go ahead and do it. So everyone's waiting. So, power of the liminal escaping digital claustrophobia. Today I'm going to take you through 3 quick chapters. Collision, when different worlds combine and new possibilities are created. Compression, when these possibilities are squeezed out of our daily lives. And release, how do we design these back into the real world and into our lives? About 8 or 9 years ago, social roboticist Heather Knight and I, as well as a huge group of wild, brilliant, muppety people, came together and started working on a thing called robot ballets. Not just because robots should dance with humans, but because when they did, something remarkable and beautiful happened. Artists showed up, engineers, roboticists, world-class athletes, writers, philosophers, legal minds, and policymakers. People who normally wouldn't share a room came together and braided instincts and knowledge sets and vernaculars and language styles. And we looked back on everything and we realized that the robots were not the point. The collision was. Not a place, but a condition. A threshold where different worlds come together just long enough that something new can form and emerge. A temporary or shared vernacular amongst people and practitioners of every background. Because cross-pollination doesn't happen in strategy meetings. It happens around things that invite attention, curiosity, and presence. If you'll bear with me for a moment, please pay attention to this lovely video, and you'll see a little bit of cross-pollination in the wild. These people do not share disciplines, but they are sharing attention. And that's where I think a lot of the magic happens. This wasn't a performance, it was not a product or demo, it was just a condition for connection. And I think a lot of people are really starving for that right now. And that's where connection begins. For about 40 years, we've optimized for connection. We've optimized for speed, scale, and efficiency, but we've forgotten to design for encounter. People don't feel disconnected, they feel compressed. We live inside of feeds and silos and algorithmic mirrors. And when we stop encountering difference and diversity, cross-pollination collapses. Someone once told me, expression is a want to have, not a need to have. I think that that principle and that concept quietly breaks society. Because expression is how we signal safety, it's how we recognize each other, and it's where connection begins. Expression isn't a novelty, nor is it decoration, it is infrastructure. Social, emotional, and very, very human. People don't lack identities, they have extremely rich identities. We've built these entire worlds online, and yet we're somehow disconnected. We've built identities the sizes of cities, but we try to store them in studio apartments. And where identity can't breathe, cross-pollination collapses. So the question isn't, how do we build better platforms and systems? It's, where does identity go to live? What happens when our identities and our digital identities can leave the screen and enter into the real world, into the physical realm, move onto bodies and objects and surfaces? What happens when these things become like signals and not content, like feathers that can talk? We already know this intuitively. Children talk to their toys. They create relationships with things. They project huge amounts of value onto abstract objects by adult minds. And then somewhere along our journey, somewhere along the way, they are told, and we are told, that these things have no value, and that value, if it does exist, that meaning belongs in our head and on screens. And I fundamentally disagree with that. We already know that objects throughout history carry so much culture and so much meaning. And there's tons and tons of proof around that. Hats, totems, clothing, etc. And so, how do you design things that invite interaction, permission, and stories? Objects that tell stories before our words do. So we know objects carry a ton of meaning. So the big question is, how do we design consciously? How do we put stories into objects so they can do the talking before us, so our feathers can do the talking? What you're going to see is not a product demo, it's a glimpse into what happens when you design consciously and create conscious objects that tell stories and that help us leave the digital world and move that identity into the physical lives that we have. So what changes there is not the technology. What changes is the risk for interaction, the risk for cross-pollination. Expression does the work first, the feathers do the talking. And our expression is both an identity, but also invites permission and curiosity and interaction. Two of my favorite humans, colleagues and collaborators and friends, Orit Gal and Robert Leonard, refer to this as positive social friction points. Two humans, two strangers, a cigarette and a lighter. 5 seconds of cooperation and a human moment. And that moment can lead to so much and so many outcomes. I'll leave you guys with these thoughts. Cross-pollination is not accidental. It is very much so designed into the spaces we gather, the objects we carry, and the surfaces around us. Expression is by no means decoration. It's the infrastructure that lets identity breathe. Looking back, the robot was never the point. The expressive wearables were never the point. The collisions were. And the future doesn't need smarter machines. It needs braver ways of meeting. Thank you.